Hello, company. I'm looking forward to talking with you today about the effects of motivation and communication on attitude. And so, without further ado, let's get started with a story because we have a lot to cover. Helen was an excellent employee. She was always on time, rarely missed work, and was very knowledgeable and thorough when it came to her job responsibilities. She had an agreeable and outgoing personality, so teammates loved her, and those she interacted with in her role respected and liked her. She was an asset to her organization and a phenomenal colleague. She had been with the company for just over a decade when one morning she dramatically marched into her supervisor's office with emotions uncharacteristic of her personality and threw her letter of resignation on the desk and exclaimed, "I quit." As quickly as she could gather her things, she was out the door. Fortunately, the organization's assistant executive director was able to interview her after that morning and get some critical feedback on Helen's experience. Words like bullying and favoritism were used when describing her supervisor. Other things that came to the surface were unfair treatment, poor communication, and unclear expectations. In the end, the overwhelming sentiment was that it just wasn't worth it anymore. The supervisor had no idea that any of his actions were landing on Helen that way, or that he had a hand in creating this toxic environment. Was this situation avoidable? Could Helen have made her supervisor aware of how his actions were landing on her? What if Helen's already amazing performance could have been improved even further? And that's what we want to talk about today: motivation, communication, and attitude. So we want to spend some time defining some terms and talking about some tactics. So we're going to begin by defining motivation, which can be defined as a psychological concept developed to explain why people get involved in, engage in, take action toward, do, or get excited about things. Motivation is simply the drive to do something. It can explain the why in a person's actions or behaviors. The ability to have motivation can be experienced by everyone. Motivation is discretionary. The energy, arousal, or effort a person chooses to devote to a particular action or task in a particular direction with a particular intensity for a specific amount of time at a specific time frame. So what factors play into motivation? Specifically, two main factors influence motivation, such as attitude and communication. Performance is influenced by several factors, such as motivation, behavior, commitment, and more specifically, attitude. Noticeably, as an individual enjoys their organizational environment and task, they are eager to complete it. However, if the organization despises their task, they are not driven to work. Generally, motivation reflects a positive attitude, while lack of motivation is a result of negative attitude. Motivation is vital as it results in efficient workplace performance. There are several theories of motivation, such as need-based, job-based, and cognitive-based. There are internal and external concepts of motivation. Internal concepts consist of intrinsic rewards, autonomy, competence, and self-determination. On the other hand, external concepts consist of extrinsic rewards, such as pay raise, promotion, vacation, and time off. So how does individual motivation affect the organization? Individuals collectively are interdependent on one another to contribute to the functioning and efficiency of the organization. More or less, motivation will determine performance. If individual tasks are completed, the overall organization's goals will be met. So let's define communication. Generally, communication refers to the transmission channel for sharing the information. Simply put, communication is concerned with how messages are shared. There are strengths and weaknesses to all different mediums. We've learned throughout this semester that certain situations call for specific mediums. What could Helen's supervisor have done better in order to avoid the poor communication she talked about in her exit interview? According to a 1998 study by Fink and Longenecker, there are important competencies a manager must have to be considered effective, one of them being communication. Did Helen's supervisor effectively communicate with her through written and verbal mediums? Was she aware of her job duties, and did she receive clarified performance expectations? Did her supervisor thoroughly understand what she did in her role and the scope of her position? If Helen believed that her supervisor failed in any of these areas, his managerial effectiveness could be considered poor. So what factors play into communication? Managers who ensure a constant stream of communication will build trusting and open relationships within the organization. Effective communication builds employee morale, satisfaction, and engagement, and helps employees understand job expectation and gives employees a voice. Also helps to lessen the chances for misunderstandings and potentially reduces grievances and lawsuits, improves processes and procedures, and ultimately creates greater efficiencies and reduced costs. Ineffective communication may increase the chances for misunderstandings, damage relationships, break trusts, and increase anger and hostility. So let's identify and define attitude and why it matters. Attitudes are summary evaluations of a psychological object, such as a person, people, place, or event. Attitudes are created by beliefs, feelings, and/or on past behavior, either ours or others. Attitudes can be complex, intricate, especially within a work environment. Positive attitudes can foster favorable job performance and organizational commitment. If managers are able to masterfully harness their understanding of workplace attitudes, they can be used to positively affect the organization. Attitudes matter because they serve as predictors. They are able to forecast what will happen next. Predictors include job involvement, fairness, organizational support, and trust. Did Helen's belief that her supervisor was bullying and showing favoritism become evident in her workplace attitude? So how does the individual differ from the group? Although individual communication and motivation is separate from the group, it can affect both it and the organization as a whole. Coaching, a one-on-one conversation focused on the enhancement of learning and development through increasing self-awareness and a sense of personal responsibility, can successfully be applied in group settings. So why is the individual significant to the group? We would propose that the individual is significant to the group for two main reasons: turnover and group synergy. From an organization's perspective, having dysfunctional turnover and losing good employees like Helen is not ideal. The more motivation is low, the less the individual contributes to the group. Richard Hackman proposed a model on team effectiveness that included, like many others, group-level factors, organization-level factors that affected their process criteria of effectiveness, which ultimately had an impact on group effectiveness. However, Hackman added an additional factor: group synergy, that affects the group process. The idea is that group members, using talents, abilities, and energy they bring to the team, allow an interaction that doesn't otherwise occur. The meshing together of team talents and abilities and energy create a contribution that is better together than if each individual contribution were added together. Another result of this synergy is more efficient processes and increase in motivations. So it benefits the whole organization to increase an individual's motivation and communication, as it will affect job attitudes and their contribution to the group overall. Now that you are absolutely convinced that individual motivation and communication affect the overall organization, and that the individual is significant to the group and the outcomes they produce, now what? What can your organization do to increase the motivation and communication so that the resulting job attitudes help the overall outcomes of the organization and the individuals as well? Well, before I answer that, remember Helen? Helen was the cautionary tale in the beginning of this presentation. After the organization lost Helen, they decided to take a hard look at their organizational culture and what it would take to increase motivation and communication and affect job attitudes so that they wouldn't lose gems like Helen to anything other than a better opportunity or winning the lottery. Allow me to introduce you to the term coactive coaching. Coactive is a combination of being, and active, doing. This method of coaching builds from the foundation that relationships are collaborative, cooperative, co-created, active, and engaged, and they yield action steps and learning. It also holds that each individual is creative, whole, and resourceful. Coactive coaching puts the power in the hands of the coachee. It encourages coaches to be curious and listen on a level that is beyond merely hearing the words that someone is saying. Coaching sessions are designed to be an exploration of what the coachee would like coaching on, and while there are action steps at the end of most sessions, those steps are up to the coachee to set and accept. This will increase motivation because it puts the coachee in the driver's seat of problems or concerns often seen as out of their hands. It also allows employees to develop a plan to move forward and talk out what they might do or say and make action commitments and outline how they would like to be held accountable by their coach. This will not only increase motivation, but also increase the communication skills of those being coached, and those things combined will increase attitudes and therefore outcomes. We are proposing a 3-phase plan implemented over the next 3 to 5 years that will ultimately give your organization a facelift and a soul shift. In phase 1 of the plan, consultants who are already trained in coactive coaching will come into your organization and offer coaching sessions as often as once a week to those employees who believe they could benefit. You will immediately see a difference. Feedback sessions should also be set up in this phase between supervisors and supervisees, and a climate survey should be sent out to your entire organization with a special section included that focuses on how the organization can increase communication. Phase 2, the leadership team and anyone in your organization who is supervising one or more people become trained as a coactive coach. This will allow supervisors to enter into the coactive relationship and use those skills with those they supervise. At this point, your organization should also identify a core team of people who could be trained as coactive coaches for those inside your organization. The idea here is that you would move away from utilizing consultants and begin creating coactive relationships within the organization. We recommend that these identified coaches go through the 5 coactive coaching classes: fundamentals, balance, fulfillment, synergy, and process, and proceed through the licensing process. Further, a communication advisory board should be developed with at least one person from every area of the organization, with a goal to advise on a communication policy refresh in the whole organization. And phase 3 is whole group integration. Every employee who has been with the company for a certain amount of time, like 6 months to a year, would be trained in the 5 core coactive coaching classes. So let's talk about group and individual dynamics. To reiterate the importance of group communication on individual motivation and why high-performance companies should get on board, we turn to Druskett and Wolf's experiment, where they tested the effectiveness of peer appraisal on open communication, task motivation, social loafing, group viability, and satisfaction with the group. They found that immediate feedback had a significant improvement on, sorry, I lost my place. And the effect was stronger, had a significant effect, and the effect was stronger when the feedback was itself positive. The recommendation is that feedback and appraisals be completed by management and team members. As much as positive feedback has been shown to help with motivation, we will at some point need to give negative feedback to simply point out concerns with performance or motivation. In a meta-analysis by Fong and others, they found that in some cases, negative feedback promotes intrinsic motivation. In order for an individual to push towards a goal, they must know where they are in relation to the goal. This gap in between is noticed through negative feedback. The individual is not pleased about the discrepancy and makes adjustments to push towards the intended direction. Going with Buscilla, Yam, and Kluger's, as cited in Byrne, strengths-based performance appraisal, we would recommend that the 3-to-1 principle is followed. In other words, when giving feedback, the ratio of positive to negative feedback should be 3-to-1. Innovation or new ideas in the workplace are significantly affected by the level of group communication and information about the company. The more communication and information, the better the innovation, as found by Monge and others in a 67-week longitudinal study of 5 different companies. Given the information, we would recommend higher levels of communication as a way to enhance innovation and employee motivation. Sharing all the information available and asking for input may enhance employee engagement and improve performance. Finally, it is our belief that if you implement our 3-phase plan, motivation and communication will increase and positively affect job attitudes across your organization. Even more important, not only will you be less likely to lose Helens in the future, But your organization's reputation will precede it and attract even more Helens to your organization. Thank you.